ゴジラが近づいております。警備隊の指示に従って避難してください。
We are getting some truly extraordinary live images here in the studio.
Approximately 7 hours ago, something attacked the city. I don't know what it is.
Welcome to Tokyo Lives, a Giant Monsters podcast, where the hosts truly believe that something will rise from the ocean and destroy us all. My name is Kyle.
And I'm Coleman.
And here we go. So this week, our main topic is G98. But before we hit that, there's a lot of little pieces of news that have come out that are definitely discussion worthy.
Well, this is definitely one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, because I have another podcast, and we get no news. There's nothing new that can come from that podcast at all. It's based around a book series that's like over 2 decades old.
Yeah.
So it's really nice. I just want to say, in episode 2, it's really nice to have current news of things happening to be able to talk about. It's great. I'm really excited.
So we're gonna start on the light side of things and talk about a little movie called Kong Skull Island. There hasn't actually been any new news about this, but we really haven't. Of course, this is only the second episode, so we haven't had a chance to give our thoughts and opinions on it briefly. So, Coleman, what are your thoughts on it? What's going on with this movie?
Well, first off, I want to talk about this because there is no news, and
Yeah.
it's not like this is an unannounced project that's circulating around Hollywood. This is something they've talked about. They've got concept art, like very, very few, but they've got a few pieces.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get us excited about with zero promotional or teases or anything.
Right.
So, I mean, we have our expectations for it. Is that the official title, by the way? Kong Skull Island?
Yes. No
Not
king.
King Kong?
No king in the title. It is just Kong
Maybe
Skull Island.
he's not a king yet.
Yeah. Not yet. No, yeah, and I mean, it is being made by Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers. So, I mean, it is possible that they are just kind of copying the marketing technique from Godzilla 2014, since now they're a shared universe, which most people know that at this point, but if you didn't, congratulations. Maybe they are trying to do this whole, like, we're not going to release any full trailers or anything until, like, 5 months before it releases, and then we're going to marketing blitz like nobody's business. I mean, it worked out for Godzilla 2014, so...
And all the cool kids are copying that
Yeah.
as far as giant monsters are concerned, so...
Yeah, but I mean, we really don't know anything. I mean, the fact is that, Kong is going to be fighting Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Kong, or Kong vs. Godzilla. I don't know if that's the official title or not. But I mean, that's going to be happening in 2020, I believe. So, I mean, we're on our way there. And I mean, Kong is going to either be made bigger or this is going to be a no contest fight. So I don't know. I mean, since we have no information, it's kind of hard to judge what they're actually going to be doing with it.
I mean, maybe King Kong will resort to guerrilla warfare.
Oh, that's bad.
It was okay. It's not my bad.
It's pretty bad.
But, I mean, my thing with Skull Island is, they have to tell us what's going to happen to Kong, when he does fight Godzilla. So you have to either show him big or show him get big. That doesn't sound like it'll happen, but...
Want to see a Power Rangers monster? Like, now my monster grow! Like, what's...
Yeah. We're getting into the Power Rangers references really soon.
I'm sorry.
But, no, it would be weird if Kong in Skull Island was just business as usual, normal size.
Yeah.
And then showed up big in Godzilla vs. King Kong.
Yeah, and I think, I don't think they're that stupid that they would just do that. I feel like that, since they are doing this whole shared universe thing, that they are going to at least, make reference to it at least, if not give a full explanation.
You know what I didn't think about? Various Kong movies have shown, like a skeleton of another ape on Skull Island.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's 2 ways this could go. I didn't even think about this, but Kong Skull Island takes place in the 70s, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so get this. 2014 Godzilla takes place pretty much in 2014. That's what we're assuming, right?
Right, yeah.
So what if Kong Skull Island goes with either a young Kong who hasn't grown yet, okay, or a different Kong, and then it dies, or something. I don't know. Maybe like it mixes it up in that way, like so it has like either a different Kong, a mother or a father or something like that, and a child comes in, or it is like a child, a young ape, so that they can do a normal Kong Skull Island movie that would be like King Kong like we know, and then he just grows to be bigger over time to meet with Godzilla 2014.
I mean, he's got to grow a lot. I mean, the movie takes place in the 70s, and as far as we know, Godzilla 2014 actually takes place in 2014. So, I mean, I guess that's a long period of time. I mean, gorillas grow pretty fast, right? I mean,
yeah, like 4 or 5 years and they're mature, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm no gorilla expert, but,
I am a gorilla expert, actually.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh, okay. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with it and when we're going to get marketing. I mean, I'm pretty sure, we're going to get something at Comic-Con, obviously. They've been doing really well with reveals for at least the Comic-Con crowd for Godzilla. And last year they did Kong as well. So, I mean, maybe we're going to get something for both. I don't know. I mean, Godzilla 2 is going to get here real soon, too. I mean, Marvel and DC and all of them have already announced their 2018 movies 100%. So it's getting close to Godzilla 2. So, I don't know.
I guess I just don't really know what the Legendary Monster series, like who they're competing with either.
I mean, they're competing with themselves, it seems like, but,
Well, yeah, but they're not like, they're not trying to beat Marvel like
No.
DC is. I mean, they're trying to obviously create a shared universe franchise.
Yeah.
But it's, it's like no one knows what it looks like yet.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very interesting. Like, Godzilla 2 has a terrible release date right now. It's going to have the same problem that the first one did with X-Men Days of Future Past. Like, literally the week before it is like a Marvel movie, and the week after it is like a DC movie. Like, it's a terrible time to release it. No, actually, sorry, the week after it is not a DC movie, it's Jurassic World 2. So, like, that's a terrible idea to try and pit Godzilla up against those other movies. Godzilla needs like a week by itself, and then like a second week to make a decent amount of money without anything big coming out. Because that's what happened with Godzilla 2 is Godzilla 1, sorry. Godzilla 1 came out and then had a great opening weekend, like way better than anybody predicted. And then the second weekend came and then it was like, oh, well, here's Days of Future Past. And it just killed all of Godzilla's business, like super quick in America. So it's going to be interesting to see. First of all, I don't even know Kong's release date. I know it's next year, but I don't know, anything. Like, is it April next year or is it late next year?
Well, I think they'll want a wide open. I think they see it as a huge tentpole, and it could be, but we need to see something from it to tell us that.
Yeah.
But I just want to see something from it, show what tone they're going for, what the monsters. Because I think if they're doing the shared universe, like say DC or Marvel are doing, which I would assume is what they'd want to do, they have to keep that same tone. And from I remember 2014 Godzilla pretty well. And it seemed like that was going for an uber realistic tone that just happened to have giant monsters running around.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of cool. Seeing a modern or somewhat modern Kong, where you have people running around with modern day weaponry and clothes and way of talking, and they're really trying to depict this mysterious hidden island. I could see that being really cool.
Yeah.
I just need it to be different than what we've seen before. It can either be completely fantastical or it can be super realistic. And I don't know. We'll have to see what they go for. Yeah.
No, I get you. Moving on to the next piece of news is related to Godzilla, actually. It is specifically related to Shin Godzilla or Godzilla Resurgence, whichever one you want to go by.
Well, this is a completely unfounded rumor, so don't even take this with a grain of salt. Take this as either no one knows what they're talking about or this leaked out somehow.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two parts of this rumor. There's two instances. It could be either Shin Godzilla, obviously is a Japanese Godzilla film. And from the looks of it, they're going for kind of the classic way of shooting Godzilla, aka, a man in a suit. We've seen leaked pictures of the suit and all that. But the rumor going around right now is that they've scrapped the suit and are going completely CGI.
Right.
Now, that seems a little strange to me because, A, we don't know what the budget is, but generally Toho doesn't have a lot of money to just throw away because they don't like something. And it also seems like a lot of it is based around the reaction that the United States fans had to the Godzilla suit, which Toho never in the past has cared or anything, reacted at all.
No, yeah, they usually don't react to that.
Yeah, to American fan reaction. So that just seems strange to me. Now, the second rumor that kind of like plays off of that is that the director, who's there's two directors on it, but the special effects director directed Attack on Titan. That's fully CGI. Giant humans walking around and doing things. They think that he is doing a fully CGI Godzilla that has close-ups and kind of the normal way of filmmaking with giant monsters or any kind of monster is you have models and animatronics, and in this case, a guy in a suit, just supplementing the normal CGI creature.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems more realistic to me. That's kind of Toho coming up with the times, but not throwing away the past. And it's also a well-known way of shooting a special effects film. So that makes sense to me. I think that one's more possible, and maybe that spawned the first rumor.
Yeah.
But that's what is running rampant around the internet right now.
Yeah, and I have trouble believing. Well, okay, the second one is definitely the most believable. The first one is almost seeming like an American fan just coming up with an excuse. Like, I don't like the design, so here's what I heard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I severely doubt that they're going to go full CGI. They don't have the infrastructure for it. That's always been the problem with Japan, with CG and stuff. I mean, that's why, whenever you see a Japanese-made movie, Godzilla or not, usually their effects are miniatures and stuff, even nowadays. So,
well, I mean, movies like Attack on Titan,
yeah,
Death Note, and things like that, those have pretty heavy CGI use.
Yeah, but it's not good.
It's not, but
specifically, Death Note's especially is like really bad, but
that hasn't held them back from making the film. So.
No, but I feel like what they're trying to do with this movie is they're not necessarily trying to compete with Legendary, because if they were trying to compete with Legendary, they would just say, "Oh, you don't have the rights anymore, you can't do it." Like, I feel like what they're trying to do is they're trying to do some like healthy competition instead of what it was after the movie of this, podcast subject, G98, where they came out and like lashed back and were like, "Oh, well, that movie sucked, so here's the true Godzilla." Like, granted, that's what Shin Godzilla means in Japanese, so they are kind of doing something a little strange like that. But I feel like they are trying to be up in the times, but at the same time play back to their legacy, specifically Toho's legacy. So, I mean, we've known for a long time that they're doing the mixture of the two effects, but I know that there was a lot of negative backlash to that puppet that showed up online, both in Japan and America. I know Americans were the ones that were the most vocal about it because we live in America, so we can see that a little bit more. But I did read several people talking about some Japanese bloggers and stuff, like saying how stupid it looked. So, and they were comparing it directly to the Legendary Godzilla. They were like, "Oh, well, we can't stand a chance against Legendary Godzilla. Look at what we're putting out." And they referenced the puppet. So I think that what probably is going to happen is we may end up, and we probably will never actually know the true story of this. We're probably going to see the movie, and it is going to be a mixture of the two effects. Granted, it might be leaning heavier on the CG, but we would actually never know. Maybe that's what they always intended. Like, I just, it's stupid to think that they're going to go full CG at this point. I cannot see them doing that. Maybe if this movie comes out in Japan and does really well for Toho, and they get, some budget behind them for the next one, maybe then they'll go full CG. But right now, we're all assuming that this movie is getting about the same budget as the old Godzilla films, and their budget was tiny compared to what we have in America. So,
well, I think with my opinion is it's not that different from yours, but I think with maybe the boost in revenue they've gotten from royalties with the 2014 Legendary Godzilla movie, and the fact that CGI is becoming much more present in Japanese films. I mean, there's entire CGI Japanese films now.
Yep.
I think it's possible. I think it definitely will be supplemented. And I don't mean supplemented like one or two shots. I mean like 25% of the creature being, a model or an animatronic or a robot, or not a robot, a suit.
Yeah.
And then 75%, wide shots, big fighting scenes, things like that being CGI. I think that's within the realm of possibility, at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially with rumors like this flying around. It's not necessarily that they're 100% true, but the fact that they're going around means, somebody somewhere is working on something.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the wait and see game. It's still, we have no information. It's exactly like Kong Skull Island. Like, yeah, there's some stuff out there, but there's not enough. Like, I mean, show me the first real trailer with real footage, and then I can actually give you a judgment of like, oh, yeah, they probably saw the first CG test of the Godzilla, and they were like, oh, this is amazing. We should just do more of that. There's just not enough information to really comment. And I do think that regardless if the second idea is more true or not, this is just fans just kind of coming up with ideas since we have no real information. And now, some news that actually broke last night for us, but for you listeners, it will probably be a couple weeks ago. The Pacific Rim 2 news.
Yeah, this is really exciting. So Pacific Rim 2 has landed a director, which, considering most of us didn't think the movie was even happening, that's a big piece of news.
Yeah.
Whether you like the news or not, that's
up for debate.
Another thing. Yeah. So I believe it's Stephen S. DeKnight.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's right.
Stephen S. DeKnight has been named the director. If you don't know that you don't know his name or who he is, that's fine. It makes sense because he's a producer-writer for the new Deadpool series. Oh my gosh.
Deadpool.
the
Daredevil.
New, Daredevil series on Netflix.
Yes.
So he's not a director.
No.
I think he's directed a few things, but he's not a studio director.
No, yeah. He directed a episode of Daredevil. It was the last episode of season 1 of Daredevil. He directed that. And then he directed a couple episodes of the other show that he was involved with, which was the Spartacus TV show. But yeah, he's fairly new, which is the trend in Hollywood right now. I mean, Gareth Edwards had only directed Monsters before he directed Godzilla. So, I mean, I'm not that surprised by his the choice of him, but I'm more surprised is the fact that Guillermo del Toro is no longer directing, he's just producing. And I'm sure there's a lot of in the back of the studio stuff that happened with that. I don't think we'll, just like most things in Hollywood, we'll never actually get the full story of what happened. But I mean, as of the day before yesterday, this movie was put on hold indefinitely. Like, it was not going to be made for a while, at least. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh no, it's being made, and we got a director, and we're good to go. And it's just like, okay, what changed? Like, what happened?
I mean, I assume he had a really good pitch for it. Something along those lines, probably a big Monster fan or a big Pacific Rim fan specifically. But I mean, the last episode of Daredevil was a great episode. I'm not going to take that away from him.
Yeah.
And I know Vikings has, or Spartacus, is that right? Spartacus?
Yeah, Spartacus, yeah.
Yeah, Spartacus has its following.
Yeah, I haven't ever seen Spartacus myself, but I mean, everyone who's ever suggested it said it was really good, so, yeah, continue.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can't wait to see what he does, but, you made the comparison to Gareth Edwards. At least Gareth Edwards made a beautiful, story-driven, monster movie before he did Godzilla. So that at least makes a little more sense to me. I would compare it more to, like, Colin Trevorrow, who made one movie that had nothing to do with dinosaurs or action or barely anything to do with sci-fi, and then he was given Jurassic World.
Yeah.
So take that, positive or negative, however you felt about Jurassic World.
Yeah, but I mean, but it still is definitely a trend. There's another movie that this happened to recently, but I can't remember what movie it was off the top of my head. But I don't know. It's great that we're getting Pacific Rim 2. I mean, I have a lot of opinions on whether we should even get a Pacific Rim 2. As much as I really liked the movie for what it was. It was kind of a condensed story, and it was kind of a thing that I felt really shouldn't have been expanded into a sequel necessarily.
Well, see, I liked Pacific Rim. I have some big issues with it, and some of my biggest issues were just the fact that while Guillermo del Toro knows what he's doing at the concept level, man, the characters and the story and any kind of depth to the movie just was completely absent.
Yeah.
So I'm all for a new voice coming into Pacific Rim.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now that I've heard who the voice is, I'm just like,
You're just hoping for someone bigger, I guess, like to be
not necessarily bigger, just that we have any kind of
way to gauge it.
Yeah, someone who has merit and similar experience or anything.
Yeah. But I mean, then again, Gareth Edwards, I know you used Colin Trevorrow as the better example, but Gareth Edwards, we had Monsters to judge him on, which had a lot of people worried about 2014 Godzilla. Like, Monsters, and we ended up with something that was like a mix between his film Monsters and a Godzilla film. But, for better or worse. But, a lot of people were scared for it. They were like, oh, well, the whole purpose of Monsters was it was a character story where monsters were around the people. And people were like, that's not going to work for a Godzilla movie. So to a certain extent, it might be better to have this blank slate of, I have no idea if you like monsters or who you are. And I'm sure we're going to hear interviews with him and stuff, pretty quickly, I would bet, if they're going to push this forward as quickly as I think they're going to. Because, you don't want people to forget the Pacific Rim even happened, which most people actually kind of already have. General audience people.
Yeah, with the Gareth Edwards thing, it just makes me think, like Monsters, I'm sure we'll talk about it more on the show.
Yeah.
Might even have its own episode. But the greatest thing about Monsters was you really had that from-the-ground experience, not knowing what these monsters were. And then when you saw them, it was all, like, from behind counters or at the gas station, behind something. And I thought he really brought that to Godzilla, that mystique of being a man on the ground.
Yeah.
And in a real environment, catching glimpses of a monster. Not like Cloverfield, where you literally don't see the monster, but more like showing... like when you pull off a good effect in a movie, you hide it for the most part, like in rain or fog or some kind of atmosphere, so that it looks more realistic and you can more believe it. Gareth Edwards did that with just how he framed his shots.
Yeah.
And he really brought that to Godzilla. So, I don't know. Let's just see what the new guy does, but I'd like to see, again, the 3 big story news items that we wanted to talk about on the show today are all based around the idea that we're not seeing anything and we're worried about it. Yeah,
it's literally all the big giant monster movies that are coming out soon. And we could throw 10 Cloverfield Lane in there. I don't want to talk about that right now, but it's that whole purpose of that movie is for us to not know anything. For better or worse, if you reference our last podcast, you'll understand like what we were talking about. Like, oh, it's great, but if there's no monster in it, I'm going to be so mad.
Yeah, and I have no problem revealing that the next episode we do, that we're going to try to get out before 10 Cloverfield Lane, is going to be our Cloverfield episode. We're going to talk about the ARG. We're going to talk about the first movie, where the second one could go, what's realistic if it's not an anthology movie. That's going to be our next episode. So if you are listening to a Giant Monster podcast because you're excited about Cloverfield, stay tuned.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think it's about time for us to get to the subject of the night.
You want to jump into it?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
A monster will destroy us all.
Prehistoric monsters.
A monster will destroy us all.
Monster.
A monster will destroy us all.
Prehistoric monsters.
A monster.
This monster you've seen, you think your bombs will stop him?
Tonight we're talking about a very controversial movie in giant monster fandom. Especially if you're a Godzilla fan. We're talking about the 1998 Roland Emmerich film, Godzilla, starring Matthew Broderick and whoever played that girl, Audrey.
What was her name?
Starts with an M, maybe?
Maria Patillo. Or Patillo. Yeah.
Something like that. She's never worked again.
No, she really hasn't, actually. I went to her page. She has not done anything.
Wow. She's not even terrible in this. It's just very unmemorable.
She's kind of terrible. But anyway.
So we wanted to talk about this, not just to be controversial and give views. Although if that makes people click on the episode, I'm not going to mind.
No, of course not.
But we want to talk about this because this is a polarizing film and the fan base. And when I say polarizing, I mean everybody's on one side. Like, everyone hates this movie. It's only in the last year or so, or a couple years, that it seems like people are starting to turn around and not say this is a good movie, but start giving it more of a chance or lay off of it a little bit. I don't know. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of people are starting to. They're not really like they're not coming around to the movie, but they're coming around to like definitely the creature, Zilla or Gino or whatever the heck you want to call him. They're coming around to the creature a lot lately. I mean, he was featured in the most recent Godzilla comic. Like, he was there, and it was awesome every time he showed up. So I think fans are becoming more and more accepting of him. But I mean, as far as the movie is concerned, it is generally still thought to be a bad movie. But people are definitely coming around to the creature and, well, just in general, what happened with this movie and why it is the way it is.
Well, I've got one major question.
Yeah.
That I want us to completely avoid right now, but I'm going to come back to it at the end of our conversation.
Okay.
And my main question I've been thinking about is it actually a good thing or a terrible thing that this is named Godzilla? That's my main question.
Okay.
What does it mean for this to be called Godzilla, and is it better for it or worse for it?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So let's come back to that.
Gotcha.
But opening salvo, we both watched this within the last 24 hours, 48 hours. What do you think of 1998's Godzilla?
Okay, here's the thing. I am middle ground on this movie. I like certain things, I hate certain things, but I do think I lean towards more of the dislike of this film more than I like it. Various reasons for that. One, and this isn't something that I can't really hold against it, but it has a very 90s way of being a movie. And everyone who grew up in the 90s understands exactly what I'm talking about. But it's just a specific tone that the movies that came out in the 90s had. And it really isn't a good or bad thing, but it's so prevalent in this movie. Like,
I mean, it wouldn't be that crazy if, like, Rachel, Ross, and Chandler showed up in this movie.
Right, yeah. No, and I mean, the cast is filled with people that voice The Simpsons. Like, I mean, it's insane. So, I mean, it just has a very 90s feel to it. And, I mean, that is good or bad. But the thing that I have to say about this movie is I feel like, first of all, Nick Totopoulos, main actor, Matthew Broderick, sorry, he's horribly miscast in this role. He doesn't, it's like, he's a very wormy person in real life. I've always heard the joke of that, a wormy person plays a worm guy. That's the joke. I think that his role in this movie as a main character is very strange. Like,
what archetype do you think they were going for with this character?
I don't know. That's the hard thing to say. Is like, he's supposed to be a scientist, but he's not shown to be very smart. Like, he makes all these weird, like, one-liners, like, that's a lot of fish. Like, he does this weird, like, quirky scientist thing, which just doesn't make sense to the character he's playing. I don't know if that was written in the script. I've never read the original script for G98, unfortunately. But it's just very strange. The supporting cast, other than the lead actress, is actually really good. Hank Azaria, who plays the cameraman, he's awesome. I love him in this movie. He's great. Yeah, that's where he gives, like, all the great jokes in this movie. The only funny jokes in this movie come from him and Jean Reno. But I mean, Jean Reno is just an amazing actor, so I mean, he brings that gravitas with him, regardless of what role he's playing. But I think, most of the people here are actually wanting to know about my thoughts on the monster, or general thoughts of the monster, and I'll let you kind of give your opening salvo as well before I go too into it. But, Gino, and I'm probably going to switch between Zilla and Gino 20 times in this podcast, because that's just, I mean...
I settle on Zilla.
Yeah, I mean, Zilla is his official name, but I call him Gino just because that's what everybody was calling him in the early 2000s. Whenever.
And if you don't know what Gino stands for, it's Godzilla in name only.
Yes, yeah, it's Godzilla in name only. I like him as a monster. I like his monster design to a certain extent. I don't like him at all as a Godzilla design at all. He has certain aspects that would work, and I don't think it's actually the design's fault to a certain extent. But I'll get more into that in the middle of this. I just think that he doesn't look enough like Godzilla to really. I didn't get that iconic Godzilla look from him, and it bothered me. It didn't bother me when I was a kid, when I first saw the movie. I like everybody else who first saw this movie when you were a kid, I know nobody wants to admit it, but you loved it. I don't care who you are. You were like, "Oh my god, Godzilla! This is so cool!"
You watched the Taco Bell commercials.
Yeah, you got all hyped up.
On
Yeah, the all the marketing. His head is as big as this sign. His foot is as big as this bus. Like everybody got hyped for this movie back in the day. It's only in retrospect that people have come to dislike it / hate it, depending on what side of the fence you land on. But I really want to hear your opinion of it, so I'm going to wrap it up with my opening salvo at least. The movie itself is bad. Okay, it's badly written. It's badly acted from certain people. The story is very formulaic. It's just very blah, and there's nothing that really makes it stand out. Other than it being titled Godzilla. So I guess that kind of gives a hint to my opinion on your question for us to talk about later. But what do you think about this movie?
So, I mean, I agree with you, and I think that's the biggest detriment to the movie, is what you just said. It's very formulaic. It's very blah. I'm about to get into the things I liked about it. I think I'm standing kind of on the opposite ground of you, as I'm in the middle, just like you are,
right.
But I'm more on the positive side after my most recent rewatch. And I wanted to talk about this just because it's becoming more popular to talk about in general. I didn't know which side of the fence I'd land on watching it again, but that's kind of where I am. I'm in the middle, but I'm more positive about it than I was because, like you said, it's formulaic, it's blah, but it's the reason I think that was so negatively taken was because it's a different formula than Godzilla. It's like a different formula than almost a monster movie. It's just a disaster movie.
Mm-hmm.
And having a formula like that, and then having this radical redesign and radical new backstory, and completely different setting. I mean, it's still a big city, but it's a very, very different setting than Japan or a mild mannered Japanese confrontation.
Yeah.
So I think you have all these things that are really, really negative because of the expectations going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, I went into it excited, came out excited, mind racing at what could have been or what a sequel might do or something like that, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit too. But that's the main thing, is that from this newest rewatch, I find that the worst parts of it are the characters. Very, very bland characters. I think you do root for them at some point in the movie towards the end, but you still are annoyed by them so much, it's hard to root for them. Matthew Broderick is just, I think he's very likable, and that saves him in this movie a little bit. He's very wrong for the role, like you said, but just likable in general, so you kind of just, go with it.
Yeah.
And I think Zilla is the big point of contention, because he doesn't look like Godzilla, except he's got spikes, and he's kind of reptilian. And I guess someone could make an argument for the fact that if radiation from nuclear blasts are turning creatures into these gargantuan things, maybe that turns them into similar looking things, and then you get the spikes and, things like that. But point is, outside of that, the fact that things are different and not what you're expecting, I had a lot of fun with the movie this time.
Mm.
The beginning drags.
Mm-hmm.
You get some classic Godzilla scenes. Fishing boats being taken down, even a tanker being taken down, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Seeing a big tanker taken down by Godzilla, and the shots they used to show that his impact on it and everything. Really, really cool opening scenes. I like the French angle that, Japan isn't the only place nuclear bombs have gone off. You have nuclear explosions being tested and going off all over the world. It's just, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the only two used in war.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that some other country might have a similar experience, just with a different creature.
Yeah, although it is funny that we Americans decided to make a Godzilla movie and shove the blame onto some other country when Godzilla's actual blame is on us.
Oh yeah, this Godzilla honestly should have come from Utah.
Yeah.
But that aside, I kind of like the story points of that, like its origin.
Yeah. Outside
of the fact that it's not Godzilla's origin, this new origin, I kind of like it. I like the setting. I like New York is obviously our biggest city, and we want to see it be trampled. Outside of that, I've already said, the story is kind of blah. although I believe the structure of the story is really good for an action movie.
Yeah.
I think they nailed that. I think the actual just writing and execution suffer.
Yep.
And from a filmmaking standpoint, I think cinematography is really good.
Yeah.
I think the shot composition is like Gareth Edwards-esque good. You're seeing like inside the tanker when it gets down, you see the claw come through the tanker wall and people are thrown. I don't think people realize how complicated of an effect shot that is.
Oh yeah, no.
Having a huge arm or a hand come through a tanker and people are thrown back by it and water comes pouring in. That's a well executed special effect.
Oh yeah.
And on top of that, just when Godzilla's like running through the city, and when he's approaching, like the couple times they put fish out for him and things like that, the composition is a reveal. It's seeing different parts of him, but not like Cloverfield where you're seeing like an arm or a leg. You're seeing most of him from really cool angles, and you're getting a really good idea of what he looks like overall because of it. But you're not getting full on shots until the end.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of good shots in the first time he appears full on too. Whenever they're on the soldiers are on the roof overlooking the fish down in the center of I don't know where that is. Is it? I don't know where it's actually in Central Park, but you know what I'm talking about. But like Godzilla, like he like walks by the building and it's just like the top of his head that comes into frame, and the soldiers are in the forefront. Like it is really good shot composition. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they do that later too.
Yeah.
In the second fish scene, like they're on another building. He's coming into Central Park, and you see his whole back and walking in. I remember it just being like, wow, that's a really great shot, and it's a good showcase of this monster.
Yeah.
And all the moving shots through the city, we'd never seen a giant monster movie tackle these kind of steady cam shots through a city.
No, yeah.
And the cool thing about that is to move from cinematography over to design and production design and special effects. A lot of those scenes have really good miniature work going on. And I don't think you realize it's miniature work. Pretty much everything in the cities with the Apache helicopters chasing them, a lot of the live action mixes toward the end, a lot of the underwater stuff is really, really good miniature work. And there's so much of it. I can't think of any other reason they did it other than, it's 1998, so it's the pinnacle of that kind of special effects work without moving completely into CGI.
Yeah.
And then also, I really think it's an ode to trying to do a Godzilla film and have practical effects in there as well, even though Godzilla himself is, I would say, 80% CGI.
Yeah.
Because there are giant
and it's a little bit more than 80%. But yeah, I mean, basically the animatronic is used for. There's one scene with the actual animatronic, and it's when he has the truck in his mouth. And it's so annoying because that scene actually looks really good. Like, the animatronic looks fantastic. But then the only other times that it's used is the close-ups of Godzilla's eye. And that's it. Those are the only scenes that it's ever... And I mean, there's the tail prop that they use, of course. And the claw, like you were talking about earlier, is when it comes through the side of the ship. But other than those three things, like, the rest of it is CG. Anytime you see Godzilla, it's CG after that. So yeah, I would say it's like probably 90% CG, 10% practical for Godzilla himself.
And that's not
talking the babies. I'm not
talking the babies.
That's a whole nother issue.
But anyway, so I was surprised by how much practical and miniature effects there were, just from thinking so much of it was CGI. Just my memory.
Yeah.
And then the actual design of Godzilla, I mean, I really like the design. I think it's become a little iconic once you remove it from Godzilla in name.
Definitely.
I think it's a really cool design. I thought it was cool when I was a kid, and I think just as a giant monster, it's really, 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 really cool and well designed. I mean, I was even thrilled at the little things that I didn't notice when I was younger, and probably the last time I watched this, probably a good 6 or 7 years ago. Godzilla has a second row of teeth.
Yeah,
inside his mouth, just like the real Godzilla.
I mean, it's subtle, but yeah, it is there. It's like tiny. It's almost like his teeth are like, it's like a shark's mouth, almost is what it looks like. It's like the second row is like his teeth. If they ever fell out, they would grow in.
Mm-hmm. And the teeth are actually pretty reminiscent of Shin Godzilla. They look a lot like it goes really far back. They're kind of jagged and all over the place.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting. But anyway, so like his design, I really dug, even though. Yeah, not much to do with an iguana. But
yeah, and that's the thing that I want to bring up. I never really see this brought up by anybody, and it's been something that's always bothered me about G98's design, is that, okay, so in the movie, they specifically show at the beginning, they show iguanas. Like, they show a marine iguana and a green iguana, and and like above the nest and next to the nest. So it's obviously some sort of iguana that gets hit with the radiation that mutates. Later in the movie, they also specifically point out, almost as a dig towards the original Godzilla, that it is not a dinosaur. Like, they specifically, like, the paleontologist brings up some form of allosaur that's gone missing or whatever, missing link type thing. And Nick Katopoulos is like, no, it's an aberration. It's the first of its kind, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, okay, so you're specifically saying that it is not a dinosaur. Like, you just said that it's not a dinosaur. And then the design and the way it moves and pretty much everything about it is a dinosaur.
I think that was their concession to try to make it. Like, they wanted a different origin because dinosaur is... I mean, it's a little hard to believe.
It is. Don't get me wrong, yeah.
But they were trying to go for... a new origin that makes sense in the modern day, and then their concession to that was, well, we want to still look like Godzilla, so they made it bipedal.
Yeah, but it's just very annoying. It's like, this is 1998. We all know that dinosaurs are more related to birds than they are to lizards. Like, it just doesn't actually, like, the story of where it came from, other than there's a few design aspects of Godzilla 98. Like, he has the little neck frill, which is like an iguana's, and he has like a little thing on his chin that looks like an iguana. But like, really, like, other than that, there's nothing that really screams iguana. So they could have just not said anything, but instead they had to show that opening sequence so that the audience goes, oh, he's a lizard. And they also had the moment where the helicopters are chasing after him, and they do the whole, oh, the buildings are hotter than him. Like, so it's like, okay, so it's cold-blooded, so it's obviously a lizard. Why is he a dinosaur? We know dinosaurs and birds are not related at all, or dinosaurs and birds are related, and dinosaurs and lizards are not. It's just very strange.
Well, I mean, and they obviously do the whole born pregnant, asexual thing, which was very reptilian.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, yeah, those things aside, his origin doesn't make a lot of sense. My thing is, I like the design, and I think the creators, whether it's Roland Emmerich or a producer or something, I really think they weren't doing digs at Godzilla. I think they were trying to do their own thing and really make a lot of callbacks to Godzilla and like show reverence. Just maybe they were nearsighted or didn't execute that well. But I mean, just things like the fact that Audrey yells at the TV when the news anchor steals her story. She yells, "It's Gojira!" Like things like that. I think is really trying to be a good Godzilla movie and do like what reboots do now and show reverence for the old one. It just didn't do it well or didn't care enough. But that aside, just to finish my opening salvo, I think that this movie holds up really well as a giant monster movie, and you have to take it with a grain of salt with the 90s. But I think it's strange that a lot of what this movie does wrong is what we forgive in so many other giant monster movies. Characters and plot. Mm-hmm. Those are the biggest problems with this movie. Yeah. Absolute biggest problems. There's some tonal issues, obviously. You don't really know who you're supposed to root for. And a lot of giant monster movies fall into that, where they want the giant monster to be a hero, but they also want to show him destroy and kill people. But anyway, that aside, story and plot and characters are the biggest sins this movie commits. And I think you could say that about a lot of giant monster movies that are iconic and classics, and we hold up as, amazing films today. So to that extent, I don't know why, other than just the backlash growing and growing over the years and the expectations, why this one is thrown to the dirt when it does a lot right. It does a lot that we get excited for with, like I said, the new Godzilla and what Cloverfield did. It laid the groundwork for a lot of that and did a lot of that really exciting stuff. Like you and I talked about before the show, the first reveal of Godzilla when he comes into New York and the cars are shaking and that build up. That is a 100%, no joke, no flaws, excellent scene.
Yeah.
It is an excellent giant monster reveal, and in any other movie, that would get you incredibly excited just as a trailer.
Yeah, no, I mean that whole sequence is amazing. Like, it's very Godzilla-like. There's nothing weird about it at that first point. And he even like, it's actually funny. And this is kind of into the middle part of my speech about this movie is like, they make it a point. Okay, so Roland Emmerich is the guy who made such films as Stargate, Independence Day. He would later go on to do movies like 2012. And he has a penchant for wanton destruction. In that first opening sequence, Godzilla causes more damage in that first opening sequence than he does the entire rest of the movie. There's the line from the Ebert stand-in, which that's a whole nother rant.
I don't understand that.
He says, like, you're causing more damage than the goddamn thing did, or whatever. And it's like, okay, so you're flat out mentioning that Godzilla is not destroying buildings, and you're the guy that loves to destroy buildings. You seem like the perfect choice to make a movie of Godzilla going crazy in a city and destroying a bunch of stuff. Like, that seems like a perfect movie for you. And yet you made a movie where Godzilla does not do that. Like, the only things he does is dig under the tunnels into the subway and hide and run away. Except for a couple of sequences where he doesn't run away for 10 seconds, then he starts running away again. Like, it's just aggravating. And that's kind of my second point is, so we talked about the basics of the movie, like the good and the bad. Everybody wants to know Godzilla himself, Gino. What is so wrong with Godzilla? And it's not the fact that he doesn't look like Godzilla, although that is a part of it. The part of it that bothers me the most, and especially on this viewing, I just really noticed it and it really started to aggravate me, is that he acts like an animal. And that is not good for Godzilla. Like, even in 2014 Godzilla, like, he was designed and supposed to be made to seem like a realistic creature, but he doesn't act like an animal. He still bursts through the San Francisco Bridge, or the Golden Gate Bridge, or whatever. And he still is a monster. He is still this hulking behemoth that tanks a missile hitting him in the chest. Whereas G98, like, he digs and hides in the city with that awful line from Matthew Broderick saying, "Oh, he's in a city. It's the perfect place for him to hide." No, the perfect place for him to hide would be in the ocean, which is where he just came from, but that's okay. It's just not Godzilla-like. And that is the biggest sin that this movie committed, was that this creature could look exactly the same and do exactly the same things except not run away and just have it be like that first attack when he first comes ashore, when he's just walking through stuff and doesn't give a care about anything. This movie would be so much better, and it would be a little bit more, it would be easier to look past its flaws, because then we would go, well, at least Godzilla was, really cool in it, and he was real fast, and he was really strong, and he did all these cool things. Whereas in this, you look at it and you go, okay, primarily, anytime he shows up, he's running away. And the miniatures thing, which you were talking about earlier, is a really good point. Whenever he's running through the city, that's really cool. There's, all the buildings around him are miniatures. And I know New York is designed like this, but this is a thing against the Godzilla design. They designed him so thin that he wouldn't have problems fitting through the buildings. And I really noticed it in this. Like, it's like a perfect corridor for him to run through. Like, it's literally like a Pac-Man maze, but Godzilla is Pac-Man. Like,
I liked that about it.
But I don't, because it's like, okay, so since you're making him a creature that's running around and not destroying things, the only opportunity for him to destroy things would be if he's bashing up against things as he's trying to run away from the helicopters. And even then, you design the miniatures and you design everything so that he doesn't do that. Like, that's...
Well, I think the biggest thing here is, again, the expectations and things like that. I think the creators and the director were giant monster fans. I just think they were fans of the wrong giant monsters.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see Beast from 20,000 Fathoms come in. You can see King Kong hardcore in this.
Yeah.
All over the place. I mean, it ends with Godzilla dying, them staring up at him lovingly as his heart stops.
Yeah, they're basically saying 'twas beauty that killed the beast. Essentially
Yeah.
is what they're saying at the end of the movie. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I mean, again, all the things we love, just not what we were expecting.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad you mentioned Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which I'm sure we'll do a podcast about later, because that's a really good giant monster movie. But
You mean Grandpapa?
yeah, but no, the thing is, like, if this movie had been just named Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and it was a remake of that movie, and they had made reference to Godzilla in it, like, you don't even have to change the plot that much. If you go back and watch Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and you watch this movie, like, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the Rhedosaurus is going to New York for some undisclosed reason, just like Gino is. Like, there's a lot of weird parallels. It's so strange.
The crazy thing is Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was basically an iguana.
Yeah.
I mean, he was an actual lizard.
Exactly.
They shot with to create that movie and stop motion and everything. But it's crazy that it's almost like he wanted to make that movie, but it wasn't a big enough name for a remake, so they used Godzilla.
And they offered him Godzilla, and he was like, oh, well, I guess I can just subtly remake Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, but just slap Godzilla's name on it.
I think he tried to do a mixture of a lot of things, and I think he does. I think there's parts of this movie and there's lines in this movie that there's no way he's not a Godzilla fan to some extent. I just don't think he's as big of a Godzilla fan as he is of these other movies. Yeah,
exactly. And, like, so that's a big message of contentment that a lot of people have with him. Is they're
content about it?
Sorry.
Contention.
Contention, that's the word. Yeah. No, but, like, he backtracked on what he said.
Yeah.
Whenever he came out, whenever they were first making the movie and they were announcing it, they were like, oh, yeah, I'm a really big Godzilla fan. And then later, he came out and he was like, oh, yeah, I started watching them. I watched, like, the original and then a couple of the other ones, and then I just got bored. Like, they're just bad, so I don't really care. I didn't really care. And I was just, and like, the instant he said that, it was like, so why did you make that movie? Like, I mean, I get it. Like, you know, it's a big movie, it's going to get buzz, it's going to blah, but it's just like, you know, we had a much better movie set up for 1994, which is Jan de Bont's Godzilla, which we're going to link this article from Sci-Fi Japan on our website after this podcast, but it goes into all the details of, like, how Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, like, took that script and just, like, ripped it in half and said, no, we're going to do our own thing. And then they just went off and started from scratch and did exactly what we just said. Remade Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, just called it Godzilla.
Yeah, and there's a lot in that 94 concept that looked like it was going to go really well and looked like what ended up in the 2014 Godzilla. You know,
yeah, there's a lot of similarities. There's
a real ode to the Japanese Godzilla in design and story and everything.
Yeah, I mean, all I have to say, like, not getting too much into that, because I could actually talk a whole podcast about that, but Gino, like, he wasn't even going to have his breath at all. Like, he doesn't have his breath at all.
No.
But he wasn't going to have it at all. And then fans found that out and were like, excuse me? Like, that's not okay. And so they, like, went back and re-added it in. But the worst part of it is that's not the actual truth. What happened is that Patrick Tatopoulos, the man who actually designed Godzilla 1998, designed him with his beam. Like, his original concept art had his beam. Every time he drew him, he showed him, like, opening his mouth in one of the pictures with a beam coming out of it. And Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich were like, no, we're just going to have him roar really loud and make things go flying.
I mean, it's similar to how Sam Raimi, like, doesn't like masks.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, but you're directing Spider-Man, bro.
Yeah, like, that's half the problem with those Spider-Man movies, is, like, he's taking off his mask every 10 seconds. How does he keep his secret identity, like, at all?
And now they've learned with Deadpool that, oh, okay, we can just make the mask show expression.
Of course,
and people buy it and love it.
Well, yeah, because they stayed authentic, which is the biggest thing that this movie is not. This movie is not authentic to Godzilla.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gotten to the point, we have so many Godzilla movies, and I'm so far removed from the release of this and everything. I've come to enjoy it for what it is. It's still not great. You know, I was still getting bored at parts of it. I had to stop it and start it, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
no, and I totally agree with you.
As a giant monster movie, this isn't the worst. That's what I'm saying.
No, definitely
and it's
not.
not even that close to the bottom.
No,
that's
it's
as
not.
far as I'm going.
It's really not. As a giant monster movie, and I think this kind of goes back to your original question. As a giant monster movie, no, it is not the worst. It's really not. Like I would much rather watch this movie than Godzilla's Revenge any day. Like any day. Like at least this movie, I can at least have a little fun with it. Whereas Godzilla's Revenge, I'm just going to be cringing and groaning every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I even said to you, like, even one of the Godzilla movies that's good and that I enjoy, something like Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, I'd still rather watch G98 than that if I'm in the right mood. But point is, I've come to see a lot of things really favorably, and I think a lot of there's a lot of really good things in G98 and Godzilla 98.
There is, and I mean I know I'm sounding really negative, and I don't mean to. Like I said, I am really middle ground on it. I do think it's a bad movie, and I do think that the Godzilla stuff is actually something that makes it worse in my head, which takes it to the negative side of being in the center. But I mean, I do enjoy it more than I used to. Like there was a period of time where I absolutely just hated it. I was just like, this movie's trash. I don't even want to see it again. But it's like now I'll watch it. If it's on TV and there's nothing else on, I'll put it on. Like, why not?
And my final say on just my feelings are, to me, I wouldn't even call it a bad movie. I'd say it's a pretty good giant monster movie. And, the comparisons to Godzilla at this point are moot because he's been made canon. Zilla is canon in the Toho Godzilla universe. And that comes back to my main question, why I asked that. Is this better off or worse off for being called a Godzilla movie? So would you shortly answer that?
It is worse off for being called a Godzilla movie. If this movie had been released without the Godzilla name on it, well, okay. Here's the thing: it wouldn't have done nearly the money that it did if it didn't have the Godzilla name on it. But I think that fans of giant monsters, just like Cloverfield, looking at Cloverfield, would not have been as harsh on it. They would have been like, "Oh, that was a really cool giant monster movie. Hey, that thing kind of looked like Godzilla, but it wasn't called Godzilla, so that whole side of the argument would have been gone." So yeah, I definitely think that it would have been more well thought better. That sentence didn't make any sense, but you get my point.
Yeah. Well, to answer my question, I think it's better off for being a Godzilla movie. I agree with you that it isn't good as a Godzilla movie in the sense that it's not Godzilla, and we've talked to death about in this podcast why it's not Godzilla and why that hurts it. But I think it's better for being a Godzilla movie because I think if this just would have been a random monster movie, maybe it would have its fan base. It would have been a cult flick. It might have lived on in small circles. But now, because it's Godzilla, and because it's now recognized by Toho, the creator of Godzilla, and he's showing up in their movies, and he's showing up in comics, he's a part of this universe. And I think this great design for a monster, I think this the best parts of it are going to live on in other forms, and maybe even come back in another movie, because he was Godzilla to begin with. Even though that's what caused everybody to hate him. Yeah. This monster that I like, Zilla, is now a part of the Toho universe and a part of this universe I like even more. So I think it's a much better movie for being called Godzilla because it's going to have longevity that it wouldn't have otherwise.
I can see that. And I mean, and this will be definitely a subject for another podcast. But, you wanted to talk potential sequels and why we all got excited. So briefly, I mean, I was super excited when I was a kid for it because I wanted to see those reimaginings, and I know you feel similar. Like you wanted to see like a new Ghidorah, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just think Godzilla was such a radical departure that the best thing we could have gotten from that is a sequel that would have shown us other radical departures of our favorite monsters. A new Mothra, a new King Ghidorah, a new King Caesar. That wouldn't happen. But a new Mechagodzilla. How cool would a Mechagodzilla have been in this universe?
Well, and that segues to what I was going to say. in some other podcast later down the line, we will definitely be talking about the animated series that came from this movie, because that is fantastic. And we saw what a Mechagodzilla would look like from this design, and it was awesome.
See,
it was
that was a
amazing.
Disappointment to me, though.
You didn't like it?
Well, no. The Mechagodzilla is great, but I'm just saying, I expected every monster in that animated series to be a
remake.
Toho monster. Yeah.
When was the last time you saw that series?
Probably sometime in college. I think I watched it.
Oh, okay.
So
well,
maybe
we'll have to
ago.
rewatch some of the best episodes from it and definitely go over it, because
and that Mechagodzilla wasn't that great.
It was good. It was a good reimagining of it. I mean, it kind of takes the next step from Kiryu, right? I mean, Kiryu is like the bones of Godzilla. This is an actual Godzilla, so it was actually. I mean, it was really cool.
It was messed up, and that's cool. But
yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to briefly state the series, because I do want to go over it later, but I think the best thing about that series was the fact that they fixed all the Godzilla issues from the movie that I've just ranted about for 30 minutes. Like, they literally were like, oh, well, people didn't like that he didn't have his beam. Okay, we're going to give him his beam back. We're going to make him actually fight stuff and actually run towards attacks. And
Did they ever explain or say whether or not the Godzilla in the animated series was pregnant or not?
No. Yeah, they got rid of that storyline really early on. They said that this Godzilla, for some reason, was born without the ability to give birth, which, for all we know, all the baby Godzillas that they completely just, like, shoehorned into the end of this movie, which we need to go back and talk about for a brief second, because that is actually, like, one of the sins of this movie that no one can excuse, is the shoehorning of, oh, now there's babies, and they hatched, and now we gotta run away from the raptors.
Let me take a moment as a co-host on this podcast to excuse that plot point. So, I think it's a great reference to the mini Godzilla movies where he has a son. So bringing in a Godzilla
enough.
progeny is nothing new to the Godzilla series. And B, say what you will about them basically just wanting to add raptors to a Godzilla movie. The whole Madison Square Gardens plot and everything that happens there is the most exciting part of the movie.
That's true.
Just watching it today, I was having so much fun watching that part. And it's not like it's really super suspenseful or anything. It's just really well done. And it's, I don't know, everything about it, the fact that they're smelling and they're like, we smell like fish. It's very good 90s action.
Yeah, it is. And that I feel like that's where it's the most 90s too, is that sequence is very, very 90s. Like, I feel like all the movies that came out in the 90s had that same similar, like, oh no, now we're in a confined space with the scary monster and we gotta run away from it. Like, it's just very...
But again, it totally worked.
It did. Okay, but here's the thing.
And real quick, I just want to say, maybe this has the fans in episode 2 already turn against me, but when Audrey gets to do her report and she's vindicated and she looks over at Nick and they're kind of saying, like, whatever happens to us, you need to destroy Madison Square Garden.
Right.
It's a good scene. I mean, it's actually, like, good acting, and it's a good payoff for her character and what she's trying to do. She gets to be a reporter and be the nice guy at the same time. I don't know, man. It kind of worked for me.
But you know what the worst part of it is? Oh, if she had acted like that the rest of the movie, maybe she would have actually been, a decent character in the film.
Yeah. Yep, you're right.
No, okay, so the babies... Okay, so you like the babies. All right, cool. The thing that I don't like about the babies, first of all, is their CG is awful. Like, it is Godzilla has some bad CG moments in it, like the movie as an entirety. And Gino himself, there's a couple of scenes where you're just like, ooh, that looks bad. But the babies... they are just black masses. Like, it's like they didn't even try to make the lighting on them match what environment they were in.
Well, they're kind of flat lighting.
Yeah,
all the really dynamic lighting that Roland Emmerich does.
Yeah,
so...
it just doesn't match anything. Like, they look exactly the same in the destroyed Madison Square Garden, where there's little fires and stuff that's lighting them, as they do whenever they're running in the actual, like, clean hallways of the stadium. So they look so bad. Granted, the animatronics when they're there for the babies are actually really cool. They're really good looking. I'm like, oh, those are really cool. But just in the transition, and we're talking in a post Lost World. We're not even talking in post Jurassic Park. I could understand if it was closer to Jurassic Park that they would be a little jarring. But oh my god, like jumping from the baby animatronic to the baby CG creature is like night and day.
But
it looks
if
really
you
bad.
remember 1998, this CG is actually pretty good for that time frame. I mean, you had The Matrix come out that blew it out of the water, but in 1999. But in 98, I mean, Independence Day, if you revisit that,
yeah, there's some bad
96,
CG in Independence Day.
That's horrible, like
Yeah.
unwatchable, does not hold up. This at least almost holds up.
Not
There's
the
a lot of bad CG. I think they're bad CG, but because it's 1998, I think for the time, it's really not that bad. It's some of the best CG that was being put out in that time frame.
Maybe, but I mean,
especially
like,
in biology, it's always harder to do biological.
yeah, but I
things
mean,
than-
like I said, Lost World came out the year before this movie, and we're talking about raptor-like creatures, and somehow they look worse a year later than Lost World. Like,
the raptors were also done in grass at night, though. That's a little
no,
easier.
they're not in full daylight, but I mean they're in the sequence in the town or whatever.
Yeah.
They're jumping around in lighting and stuff. Anyway, regardless, I think the babies were an unnecessary plot point, but the babies plot is actually a problem that America has with making giant monster movies recently. Pacific Rim is actually the only giant monster film that I've seen in recent years that hasn't had this problem. And that's because they're piloting giant robots. For some reason, America feels like, oh, we need our main actors to fight something in our giant monster movie. 2014 didn't do it until the very end, although they didn't actually fight anything. They still had to have that plot of, oh, we gotta go into the nest and blah, blah, blah. Like, I was worried that the Mutos in the nest were going to hatch, and it was going to be this like, oh no, it's like the parasites from Cloverfield. Like, for some reason, American movie makers look at giant monster movies and go, okay, well, a giant monster, we can't fight that the entire time. We've got to have something small for our main cast to fight. I don't think that's the case, but for some reason, we have that problem. We do. Like, I think what they were actually going for with the babies, and this is just me kind of just thinking out loud. I'm pretty sure what they were trying to go with the babies was an explanation for Godzilla's immortality type of thing. Trying to reference that without making him immortal. So that, oh, he breeds really quickly so that, even if the big one dies, there's going to be another one to take his place pretty quickly. I think that's what they were trying to go for, to make a reference without fully just like, oh, no, he regenerates. Because, they're going for the animal aspect of Godzilla.
Well, I actually think with the baby Godzillas, it felt more... I mean, the zombie craze hadn't happened yet, but it felt more like they were trying to turn Godzilla into some kind of plague.
Yeah.
Or they're just trying to play up the role that we created the thing that will wipe us out.
Yeah, but it felt kind of shoehorned in there. Like, like if that's what they were going for, it's like, okay, so you spent the whole entire movie really shoving it down our throats that this thing is like just an animal. Like, trying to lay eggs in New York of all places, but that's a whole nother argument.
I think it was just kind of like a blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
And especially an action movie. It feels like it's not big enough stakes unless the world is at stake.
Yeah.
You
and
you see it over and over again with these Marvel movies. Every single Marvel movie, the Earth almost gets destroyed, or it's ridiculous. I prefer the plot that it's like, oh, this is just New York and possibly Japan's problem. That is migration season could just affect these. Like, he's a big enough issue by himself. It's kind of like how you were talking about how American monster movies can't help but have some smaller foes, so we get something more, a little personal fight with the humans. But I think talking about Pacific Rim, it's one of the great things it did in the sense that it was enough that you had these personal moments between people hiding and running and being one corner away from this gigantic monster that is like a hurricane coming through. That's the personal story I want to see in every giant monster movie. So I don't need Clover's parasites, even if they made sense and they were a fun little part of Cloverfield. I don't need that American craze either. I think the giant monster is scary enough, even if he's like the other side of the island or something. Still, you're still dealing with the power's out. There's no gas. There's chaos. There's evacuations, and I don't see a need for that either.
I definitely agree with you. It's just something that is slightly annoying, and I mean, like I was saying, 2014 Godzilla kind of avoided it until the very, very end. But it just, for all those filmmakers that are listening to our random Godzilla podcast, you don't need to make some weird personal, I've got to go fight this story for the human characters. Just them being involved in a situation with a giant monster destroying a city, or a giant monster fighting another monster in a city, or whatever your giant monster pleasure. You don't have to make it some weird personal vendetta versus the babies or the parasites or the whatever. It just doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, to compare that craze to a completely non-giant monster movie from the 90s that I think does a much better job of what this movie could have done, Twister.
Yeah.
Look at Twister. You have 5 basically giant monsters. You have 5 events that there's no little small ones dropping off or anything, but the whole plot is a very personal plot.
Yeah.
And it's you could argue about whether it's done tonally realistic or not. I mean, there's some wacky parts of that movie, but
well, you're hitting that cut and deep right there, because he was the one that was supposed to direct the 1994 Godzilla.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, great. But listen, I mean, those treat the tornadoes as these beings, and you make it personal, and you keep them in focus by giving the main characters, they're running after them. They're not running away. Everybody else is running away, and it's causing devastation, and one of them has a personal experience with it that took her father away. I mean, it's great. It actually, like, the plot of that movie and the characters would be amazing in a giant monster movie. And it would work perfectly. And you almost get a little bit of that with Godzilla 2000, with the father-daughter chasing after Godzilla.
Yeah.
But seriously, take the plot of Twister, apply it to a monster movie, and that's the greatest monster movie I can think of.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I just wanted to read off some statistics, because we were talking about the CG versus animatronic and stuff.
Nothing livens up a podcast like statistics.
Jump into it. It's not a long statistic, but basically, so there were 400 digital shots in the movie and 185 featured Godzilla. And the Totopoulos created live action versions. So there was a 24th scale Godzilla suit, and then there was the giant animatronic. Were only used in 24 shots of those 400.
Okay.
So so it's it
24
was a very low amount.
24 of the 186 Godzilla shots.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it is like 10%, I guess, something like that. So, I do math.
It's basically right.
Yeah, it's a very low percentage. Anyway.
So yeah, that's really interesting, and that plays in perfectly, and is less than I thought. But either way, I think I'm feeling much more favorably toward this movie, and I feel like you could go back to it if you wash the stink of it not being a Godzilla movie off. I think it has a lot to offer. Characters and plot, not so much, but really interesting take on giant monsters. I think it has a bit of that. I'm not gonna say it's amazing. I'm not gonna say go out and buy the Blu-ray, but I think it holds up, and it doesn't deserve the hate it gets now that we're well past the 90s.
I definitely agree with you. I am a little bit more on the negative side, but I do not think that it deserves half of the hate that it gets. I think that people hold on to that hatred for the whole fact that it's not Godzilla, like, really hardcore, and can't look at the movie's positive qualities. And because of that, it just drags it down. And like we said, Zilla is part of canon now. Pretty much, we have to accept him at this point. And I've come to accept him for who he is, but if there are still those holdouts out there, and it's just like, guys, just get over it. That wasn't 1998. That was a long time ago. Like, we all know the whole story, or you can read about the whole story of why it went wrong, why they decided to do the things they did. But, when it all boils down, like, it was still a decent monster movie. And, there are so few of them in recent years that you really can't turn a blind eye to one that was actually kind of fun.
Personally, I'd really like to see him come back in some form. I mean, it's much easier to do like a comic.
He's come back in the comic, and it was, like I said, whenever he showed up in the comics, it was awesome. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a new take on this design and this monster and the concept they tried to play off in this movie. I think there's a new take out there somewhere. It's just I don't think anybody put any money towards it to make it happen. But I like the monster. If this were if there were a Godzilla fighting game that included him, I mean, I would main him.
Oh yeah, no, I would definitely play that. But yeah, I think if they snuck him in somewhere, they would have to sneak him in like in the comics, where it's almost like a tongue in cheek of like there's a moment in the comics specifically that I'm remembering where he won't set foot, like he keeps circling Monster Island, but he won't actually go onto it, and they make a joke about how like, oh, maybe the monsters just haven't accepted him yet, but I think he's getting there. Ha ha ha. You know, like I feel like if they did something like putting him in the legendary verse, let's say, as just like a side creature, like not the main villain, not like he's not the big bad, but he shows up on Monster Island and you're just like, oh, is that who I thought it was? And then like maybe you have a big payoff with him later, like the comics did. But I would like to see him again. I have no problems with him as a separate creature from Godzilla. So
I think if you look at some like the fan art out there, I think that's really, really badass.
Even the concept art for the film itself. If you go look at some of the old concept art for him, like he looks awesome in the concept art. But anyway.
But yeah, wrapping that up.
Wrapping it up.
So that's our discussion of Godzilla 98. I know there'll probably be some contention, or I think people are starting to agree somewhat with what we're saying, or at least parts of it. So let us know. We have a fully, ready to go website now where you can comment, tell us everything when this episode is posted, and let's have a little fight in the discussion boards.
Definitely.
So yeah, really hope you enjoyed this topic. This is the kind of thing we'd like to do when we talk about a movie. We're not just talking about it. We're talking about Pacific Rim. We're talking about the Godzilla series. We're bringing all these things into it and make it more topical and more of a discussion.
Yeah, and we just like we did in this, we will be referencing various other popular movies in reference to whatever we're talking about. Even when we get into the Japanese films, I'm sure that we're going to be referencing some stuff. Because and sometimes it may seem like a jump, but it makes sense in our heads. So hopefully you'll understand why it does.
Yeah. So next week, if you didn't enjoy this episode, next week we're getting into what I think a lot of people want out of a giant podcast right now. They want to talk about Cloverfield because
everybody wants to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know if 10 Cloverfield Lane is an actual giant monster movie, but F it, we're going to talk about it anyway. And we're going to talk about the original movie, what it brought to giant monsters, what it's trying to emulate from kaiju films, this whole ARG and this backstory that doesn't even make it into the film, but creates a really amazing universe. We're going to be hitting that hard next week, or not next week, whenever we put out the next episode. We're going to be hitting that hard and getting really in-depth to it. So we hope you check that out and hope it gets you excited for 10 Cloverfield Lane,
Definitely.
Which we are planning right now to do some kind of like... quick podcast or reaction podcast episode like the night we see 10 Cloverfield Lane. So
it'll be much shorter than our normal podcast. It'll be more of just a well, yeah, depending on if we have a lot to rant about or whatever. But yeah, that is definitely the intention to hit that while the iron is hot.
Yeah, because I'm so sick of like I loved listening to like Flash Filmcast or something like that, and I hate that I see a movie on maybe Thursday night or more probably Friday night, and I get incredibly excited about it, and I have to wait till like Tuesday for my podcast to come out so I can feed off that excitement. It's no good. So with big movies like that, there's not that many giant monster movies, so when one premieres, we're gonna make a big deal out of it. So we hope you're looking for that in a podcast.
Yep.
Anyway, so we've released 2 episodes now. Jump on iTunes, throw us some stars. I don't care how many. Just send us a review, comment, rate us on iTunes. Any of that gets this podcast out there so more people can check it out. We want to hit the ground running with Cloverfield so that we can put our ideas out there and talk about giant monster movies and get more made and build the hype up. And that's what we want. We want this podcast to celebrate everything that we're already in love with. So just let us know what you think. Jump on iTunes, help us out, review us wherever you can, and check out our, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have a actual website that's www.tokyolivespodcast.com. You can comment on there. We post news, giant monster news on there. Hopefully it's a one-stop shop for some people who are just as interested as we are in these things.
Yep. Well, hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you next time.
Have a good one, everybody.